So you hear me often talk about how you have to be fully engaged in what your kids are doing. You have to be fully engaged in what schools are doing. And certainly you can't just sit idly by when, for example, the Department of Justice refers to parents as domestic terrorists. You can't sit idly by when you're seeing what's happening with schools and say to yourself, well, this is fine. This is all just fine. This is, as Marcellus Wallace would say, pretty blank and far from okay. Tony Katz today. It's good to be with you. Well, the fight has taken on some unique levels of distinction. And one of those is that people are much more inclined to stand up now than they were just a year ago. Because what they have found is that more and more people are thinking like they do, or at least maybe better said, they have been able to say things and find those who connect with them. March 21st, down in Texas, the Parent Empowerment Day with Governor Greg Abbott. This is being put on in conjunction with the Texas Public Policy Foundation. Corey DeAngelis joins me right now at the federationforchildren.org. That's where you find him, federationforchildren.org. And he has been one of the people extremely proactive in this idea that you fund students, not systems, and that parents do indeed have a say in their kids' education. Corey DeAngelis joins me right now. Living in Texas now, as you are, is that what makes you part of this event, or is this a group that you've been working with on these subjects of how do you get parents in a place where they're able to speak better?
I've been working with TPPF for a while, but I also am a Texas resident, and I grew up in Texas, went to Texas public schools all through K through 12. I went to the University of Texas at San Antonio for a couple of degrees. I had a stint in D.C. for about 5 years, but now I'm back in my home state of Texas. And so this is personal to me, but also I've been pushing for school choice all across the country, and we've been winning. The wind is at our backs. We've had basically 5 states now: Arkansas, West Virginia, Iowa, Utah, and 5 states now that have gone all in on school choice in the past 2 years. So we've basically had a universal school choice revolution that has ignited since 2021. And it's the teachers union's own fault for overplaying their hand and awakening parents to the problems of the public school system. A lot of families who thought that their kids were in good public schools, when the schools closed, started to see that, well, the school's curriculum wasn't aligned with their values, which is a much more mobilizing factor for parents than something that can be captured by a standardized test.
So when we talk about this, and I often go out of my way to engage a distinction that we're not talking about all teachers and we're not talking about all administrators, but certainly we have this connective tissue that that education as a whole, and you have had many run-ins with Randy Weingarten, the president of the American Federation of Teachers, that as a whole, there's a real problem here, and it comes with, or starts in this place where teachers and administrators believe that they're in charge and there is no role for parents at all. Is that what you've come across?
Yeah, I mean, the teachers union bosses believe that your children and the money meant for educating them belong to their institutions that they staff, the government-run schools. But the reality is education funding is meant for educating the child, not for propping up and protecting a particular institution, whether that's a public institution or a private institution. The money should follow the student. The kids don't belong to the government or their institutions that they run. They belong to their parents, and parents are in the best position to make the best decisions for their own kids when it comes to their education. And that still could be the government-run public school. If you like your public school, you can keep your public school. But if not, with all of these school choice proposals, you can also choose to take that same funding that would have followed your child to their residentially assigned school. You now have the option to take that to a private school, a charter school, or a home-based education option. It's fantastic to see all of the victories that we're seeing across the country. In 2021, we called it the year of school choice because we had 19 states expand or enact programs to fund students as opposed to systems. In 2022, that's when we had Arizona as the first state going all in, allowing every family, regardless of background, to qualify. And then in 2023, we've already seen 3 states go universal. So 2023 is already another record-setting year for school choice. So we're seeing bigger proposals than we've seen in the past, and it's really fabulous to see unfolding. The wind is at our backs.
Talking to Corey DeAngelis, Federation for Children.org. You also do work at the Educational Freedom Institute, where you're the executive director. And I often forget that you're Dr. Corey DeAngelis, PhD. Before we get into this thing going on with Texas, and that really leads to a conversation about what other states are doing and not doing, you take hit after hit after hit on this subject as someone who you're not an educator. You don't know. Your doctorate is in education policy from the University of Arkansas. But to be go ahead.
To be clear, I'm not a real doctor. I'm more like a Jill Biden doctor.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, there are gradations of this. but you take these weird hits from people, as in, how dare you talk about these things as if not only are you not qualified, but you're not allowed. Dig in with me for a moment here on that elitism kind of take, where you have teachers, administrators, others who say, how dare you, whether it be you, Corey DeAngelis, or really, how dare you, the parent, think that you should have a say? You were getting into it a little bit. I want to dig in further about how you respond to it and how you offer up others respond to that push.
Yeah. So one of my first responses is, yes, I do have a PhD in education policy, but it's not even a legitimate argument. I mean, do you need to be part of the problem to fix the problem? That doesn't make any sense. And then, look, I mean, Milton Friedman said it best when he responded to a heckler that went down the same line of reasoning in one of his videos, where Milton Friedman said, if you had cancer, would you deny treatment from a doctor unless that doctor had cancer himself? Of course not. It's a totally nonsensical argument. You take the advice or the logical arguments for what they are, not based on the background of a person. It's a basic ad hominem attack. They're trying to use anything they can to silence anyone who argues for a policy they don't like. And so instead of using logic, they're resorting to logical fallacies. It's all they have. I mean, they don't have any legitimate arguments against funding the student as opposed to the system. So they have to do things like this. The other thing that I've gotten is they'll say, well, you don't live here, so how can you make this argument? You don't live here. It's like, well, is the argument a good argument or not? It's a fantastic argument that I put forward. That's why they have to resort to, why don't you don't live here. And they even tried to do that in Texas. There was a representative from Austin, Texas, and she had said, I know you don't live in Texas. And I responded saying, actually, I do. And I grew up here. And then she responded by doubling down by saying, no, you just moved here for a job to defund public schools. And I responded by saying, no, I lived here most of my life. I got 2 degrees from UTSA. I attended public schools all through K through 12. I didn't move here for a new job. And Twitter actually put a community note on both of those tweets from the representative from Texas, labeling it basically as misinformation.
I do love a good community note. Nothing makes me happier when I get to do that. Talking to Corey DeAngelis, Dr. Corey DeAngelis, and you can find more of his work at federationforchildren.org. But in Texas, this is next week, the Parent Empowerment Day with Governor Greg Abbott. It's an all-day affair. What's happening? It's at the Texas State Capitol on the North Capitol steps. What's going to be happening, and what approach has Governor Abbott taken that maybe other governors haven't?
Abbott has been leading the way on school choice this year. It's absolutely amazing. He's been going to different cities for this parent empowerment tour, pushing for school choice. During his State of the State recently, he put universal school choice for all families as an emergency item. So he even campaigned on the issue, won on the issue. And Governor Abbott has just been calling on the legislature and calling for support for school choice policy. That's what we need from all Republican governors. This is a Republican Party platform issue. In Texas, it's a top 8 Texas GOP issue the legislative session. And in Texas, they actually put a school choice ballot proposition on the Texas Republican primary ballot. And they found 88% of Texas Republican primary voters supporting school choice, which was up 9 percentage points since they last put it on the Republican primary ballot in Texas in 2018. So it went from 79% support, which is still high,
right,
all the way up to 88% support in just a few years. And this has been a ton of support that has been on the rise. There's so much momentum for this. Georgia did something on the Republican primary ballot as well, similarly finding significant shifts in favor of school choice among Republican primary voters in the state.
I don't mean to interrupt because I do want to talk more about what Texas is doing, but does the support come from the idea that they believe public education has failed them? Or does it come from the idea that they really believe my kid would be better off if I could just move them over there?
It depends on the person, but I think the significant shift has been a values-based argument for school choice, that families are currently sending their kids to institutions where they feel like they're being brainwashed. They thought that the schools were focused on education, but a lot of them are focused on indoctrination, and parents just want their kids to be raised in a way that's aligned with their values, and they want them to learn the basics as well at school. But so many public schools are not teaching kids in ways that are aligned with families' values, and so they want something different. Vodi Bakum said it best. We cannot continue to send our children to Caesar for their education and be surprised when they come home as Romans. And what I think is unfolded here is that the parents are no longer surprised. Standardized test scores weren't the only metric of quality. And now they're saying there's a more important dimension here, which is whether the school's curriculum aligns with their values. Parents want to raise their kids in ways that are aligned with their own values, not in values that are in conflict with what's going on at home.
You talk about how this played in a Texas Republican primary as the level of support. Am I to believe that there's no Democratic support for the idea of school choice and funding students, not systems? Or is there a difference between Democratic support and people? The Democratic Party needs that union dollar more than oxygen, so they can never support such a thing. Is that what we're seeing?
Yeah, it wasn't on the Texas Democrat primary ballot for a reason. They probably understood that their elected officials are voting against it, but their primary voters probably support it. And in fact, if you look at the latest polling from Texas, from the University of Houston, UT Austin, UT Tyler, Dallas Morning News did a poll. So these polls consistently find that across party lines, there's either plurality or majority support for school choice in the state of Texas. Real Clear Opinion Research polling did a similar poll and broke it down by party lines in 2022, nationwide, finding supermajority support among Republicans, Democrats, and independents when it comes to the voters. The problem is that Randy Weingarten, for example, and her union, the American Federation of Teachers, disproportionately, almost unanimously, give their funding to Democrats. 99.97% of campaign contributions from Randy Weingarten's union went to Democrats in 2022. So it puts elected officials in a tough position who are backed by the Democratic Party and the teachers unions to vote for what their actual constituents want, the voters, parents, which is school choice. But there are a couple of defections that have happened recently. In Nebraska, there are 3 Democrats, senators in their unicameral that have co-sponsored and voted for their school choice bill in Nebraska. Justin Wayne, Terrell McKinney, and one other Democratic co-sponsor over there. And there's been some other defectors, but for the most part, it has been Republican politicians in state houses that have supported school choice. Most of the opposition has come from Democrats. In Texas, for example, the Democratic House, the chair of the Texas House Democrats said that if Governor Abbott's goal or dream is to have school choice for all families, they said, quote, that they would be his worst nightmare. And that same chair of the Texas House Democrats went to a private school, and he also sent his kids to private school, yet he opposes it for lower income families in the state of Texas. I think that's hypocritical. I don't blame any families for benefiting from private education or choosing that for their kids, but they shouldn't turn around and fight against that opportunity for other families.
Unions before kids, which is why you discuss funding students instead of systems. Corey DeAngelis, you can find his work at federationforchildren.org, where he is a senior fellow, also the executive director of the Educational Freedom Institute. And if you happen to be in Austin, the Texas Public Policy Foundation, Texas State Capitol at the North Capitol steps, the Parent Empowerment Day, they're doing it with Governor Greg Abbott. I appreciate you taking the time to be with us, Corey. More is coming up. I'm Tony Katz.